Hey everyone, Dave here, and this video is all about my experience in the last few months with regard to everything that's happened relating to Covid-19 and how it's affected us all. And this is my story about how I have changed my mind twice on the situation and why I've changed my mind, what's caused me to change my mind, where I stood, where I stand now. And I want to try and just give as much detail and context as possible. And this video really is all about the crucial necessity to be able to change our minds and admit we got it wrong. So here we go. I'll always remember the weekend of Saturday the 21st and Sunday the 22nd of March. It was the weekend where everything changed. In the weeks prior, I was aware of what seemed to be a growing threat from a newly discovered disease called Covid19, although most people seem to be calling it coronavirus. At first, I dismissed the news around this virus as exaggeration and hyperbole. I'd already written a lot of content related to the mainstream media, and what I witnessed and read seemed to fit into the usual pattern, which was take a subject, imbue it with an ideology of fear, disseminate it to the public, wait for the band of doom-obsessed social media foot soldiers to hammer home the message with a sick delight, and then repeat ad infinitum. I'd long before noticed how threats to our way of life, regularly highlighted in the media and their band of crusaders on Twitter, always failed to materialise. I wondered why they were so obsessed with apocalyptic outcomes and seemed incapable of injecting balance or debate into news coverage. You only need to look at the coverage of Brexit, Trump and climate change for three examples of this. However, as time went along, slowly but surely, my perception on this threat changed. I noticed how many normally level-headed people around me were starting to become very worried. Amidst a growing concern, it became apparent that this was indeed a large-scale threat. The Covid-19 pandemic was going to kill a lot of people. It was going to rip through the population, causing mayhem and destruction. Hospitals would be overwhelmed, and no family would be spared its wrath. The fact that the government were talking to the public every single day to provide updates was a sure sign that this disease was exceptionally dangerous. After decades of little to no real threat, this was our time to suffer. By the time Saturday the 21st of March came around, the fear was at its peak. The disease had begun to claim its victims, and projections were that it would soon be out of control. By now, many people were already deciding to protect themselves by staying indoors. Many businesses were planning for closure. Hordes were descending on shops to panic buy items, and there was a palpable sense of real fear. I spoke to most of my friends at this time. They were all scared, as indeed was I. At work on the Saturday, I spoke to a customer who told me she was a respiratory nurse in a local hospital. Is it really as bad as they are making out? I asked her. Worse, she said. Doctors are going to have to make heartbreaking decisions about who lives and who dies. This chilled my blood. It was verification of what the news was saying. We really were about to be consumed by this killer virus. That night my mood crashed and anxiety took over. I couldn't sleep, and when I did, I had nightmares that I couldn't breathe. Virus, death, suffer. Virus, death, suffer. Virus, death, suffer. The message had hit home, as had my initial complacent and sceptical approach to it. On Sunday, I developed the symptoms. Oh no, was I going to be one of the millions of victims? Had I passed this evil thing on to my family and loved ones. By this time, massive concern had taken over. My girlfriend Sarah was crying. I phoned work and told them I couldn't come in as I may have the virus. I was told that there was no need for me anymore. The next day, the entire country went into lockdown. I was struggling to cope. I had no job, lost any sense of hope, and felt nothing but anguish and terror. I tried to numb the feeling with alcohol, and for the next couple of weeks I drank heavily. As the never-ending days slowly grinded by, my perspective pivoted once again. Something just didn't feel right. Just what was going on here? What on earth could justify a comprehensive closing down of most facets of society? On many levels, the mere idea of a national lockdown seemed to be beyond insane. Was this threat we all faced really as stark as we were being told? Were the measures put in place by the government and frantically reinforced by the media in proportion to this threat? Why was there no discussion in the media about the suffering that was beginning to take place right across the country as people struggled to adapt to this new claustrophobic way of life? I felt healthy, and most people I knew were healthy. The situation started to feel a little too engineered, and the messaging from the media and government had become incessant and myopic. Next came the dancing doctors and nurses on Facebook. Surely, if they were so snowed under with patients, there'd be no time for coordinated dance moves. And why weren't they social distancing? Then there was the metronomic clapping for the NHS every Thursday. After participating myself in this for the first 2 weeks, I suddenly became very irritated. It felt too staged, too bizarre, too socialist. Was this all a mass distraction from something else? As the days went by, I discovered that the government had downgraded Covid-19 from pandemic to a non-high consequence infectious disease. This was done on the 19th of March, before lockdown started. I then had a look at official government documentation from SAGE, which is the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies. This made for a truly shocking read. Amongst many sinister paragraphs about how the public need to be controlled in order to beat the virus, this one stood out as the most appalling, and I quote directly, "A substantial number of people still do not feel sufficiently personally threatened. The perceived level of personal threat needs to be increased amongst those who are complacent, using hard-hitting emotional messaging." In effect, this was calling for a psychological war on the public. Utterly abhorrent, disgusting and malevolent. Had Joseph Goebbels himself written this? More and more evidence began to emerge. The death rate from this virus was incredibly low. The vast majority of people dying were old and had existing health conditions. The virus was not a threat to most people. Even the Grim Reaper himself, Chris Whitty, the Chief Medical Officer, said so. At the government press conferences, all of the evidence showed the NHS coping fairly easily with the influx. It became clear fairly early that they had overreached and overreacted. Individuals I know who worked in the NHS confirmed that it was indeed very far from being overstretched and was indeed quieter than usual. By mid-April, the disease was on the decline, yet the measures kept on coming, and the negativity from the media was stepped up even further. More and more voices were asserting that this had been overplayed and highlighted the horrendous consequences on society. Increases in suicide, child abuse and domestic abuse, cancer referrals and treatments not taking place, hospital A&E departments eerily quiet, old people dying alone in care homes, funerals taking place with no family members present, a mental health epidemic gripping the population, mass job losses. Yet these voices were rarely, if ever, heard on mainstream media. What was this really all about, and how could any of it be justified? Now, why am I telling you this story? Because I want to talk to you about the individual power and sense of liberation you gain from changing your mind or admitting you got something wrong. As human beings, we are all conditioned in various ways, and our outlooks and beliefs are shaped by who we associate with, what experiences we've had, and what information we choose to consume. We are also, due to our egos, reluctant to admit when we get things wrong. However, it is absolutely imperative to be willing to change our stance when the time comes. Now, personally speaking, I wish I could go back in time and cancel my vote for Boris Johnson and the Conservative Party in the last general election. I gleefully spoiled my ballot paper instead. I used to read The Guardian before gravitating, as my political outlook moved to the right, to papers such as The Telegraph and The Mail. I now stay away from any mainstream broadcast or print media. I veered towards voting Remain in the EU referendum, yet ended up voting Leave. However, I believe we live in an age where tribalism rules. People seem to commit to a position and then vehemently defend it, regardless of the alternative evidence. So many seem unable to even countenance that there could be an alternative side of the argument. Why is this? I'm sure it's aided to a large degree by social media echo chambers, which are at best unhelpful and at worst utterly deranged. So my message is this: if there is anything in your gut telling you that there is something wrong here, please acknowledge it and speak your truth, whatever that truth is. Don't be scared. If this means changing your mind, then so be it. Nothing will happen aside from a sense of relief that you are speaking from a position of true integrity and true honesty. Please do this, and do it soon, for the health of our society right now and that of the next generation, who deserve to live in a free and democratic and liberal world. Please do what is right. Thank you.